Joshua chapter 9 again, just give you a little bit of background. Joshua and the children of Israel have now won some victories. They're moving up into the hill country. As they're moving up into the hill country, we learned last week that the Gibeonites decide that they're going to play a different game. They're not going to try to go head to head in battle with the Israelites. But what they're going to try to do is they're going to try to come in and befriend them and deceive them, so to speak. And when they do that, it puts Israel in a bind. Last week we talked about Joshua and the children of Israel being a little bit taken and worried about all of the kings that were getting together. The big picture confused them a little bit, and they put their guard down. We talked about that. This week we want to talk about kind of what caused that. Why would the children of Israel put their guard down? We find out that the Gibeonites come in, and when the Gibeonites come in, Joshua makes a classic mistake. In the cycle of life, what happens to us is that we begin to be blessed of God because we're obedient to God. But then the thing that creeps in is pride, because then we begin to take credit for it, and we begin to not give God, we don't rely on God for the things that we're doing. And then when we do that, the Bible tells us that something's going to happen. As children of God, He's going to correct our behavior. So we actually are going to probably fall or stumble or be exposed so that our pride is revealed to us and we can do something about it. Well, here's what happens with the children of Israel. The Gibeonites come in, and listen to what Joshua chapter 9 says in verse 14. And it says this, and this is talking about Joshua and the elders of Israel. And the men took of their victuals, in other words, they shared and broke bread with the men of Gibeon who were deceiving them. And the Bible says, and asked not counsel at the mouth of the Lord. Every time Israel's been successful, they've asked God, and God's told them what to do. But now what's happened is, after a huge success, now they don't ask counsel of God. They don't ask God what He thinks, or is this something I need to be concerned about, or is this in your will? They don't ask. They just simply do it because why? They feel good about themselves. The Gibeonites have come in and said, we're your servants. They say it 3 or 4 times. We're your servants. We're your servants. We're bowing down to you. You have a great God. You're a great general, Joshua. You're a great leader. Your people are great. We want to be your servants. Well, guess what that's doing to Joshua and the men of Israel? It's basically just pushing their egos up a little bit, and it's just enough now that they're not paying attention to what God really wants in their life. I'm going to share this with you in Proverbs 11. Basically, Proverbs 11:2 says that when you have pride, there's going to come shame in your life. That's how the pride's going to be exposed. Well, what's going to happen is, here, 3 days after Joshua and them make a league with these folks outside of the will of God, 3 days later, they find out that they're their neighbors. They really didn't come from a far country. They believe the fake news, so to speak. And so what begins to happen is that they find out, and now the children of Israel aren't real happy because they realize they are not in the will of God now. And so Joshua has got egg on his face. The leaders of Israel have egg on their face because they have done something without consulting God, and now they look bad. They look inept. They look like they don't know what they're doing, and they look prideful. And so the children of Israel now are not happy with that, and they're embarrassed about it. Well, think about this in our lives. When pride wells up in our life, let's just go right to home where we live. When pride wells up in our life, as men, I'll speak to men first. When pride wells up in our life, we don't serve our wives as we should. In other words, we don't love our wives as we should. We're not taking care of things in our relationship like we should when pride wells up. In other words, I'm successful, I'm making money, I pay the bills, I get to do what I want to do a little bit, I get some me time, I don't need to ask you any questions, I don't need to share with you, and then you kind of begin to allow a wedge to be driven in your relationship. Well, ladies, here's the way you're wired. When that husband kind of gets on the I, me, and mine thing, wives generally don't submit very well to their husbands. Some of the ladies in here are smiling. Y'all know exactly what I'm talking about. And when that pride wells up, but it can work the other way. The husband can be serving the wife, and if pride rises up in the wife and she's not submitting, again, it causes friction. Now, here's what's going to happen. God's going to expose that pride in your life. And the Bible says that we're going to have some shame from it. How many of you have ever thought that you had this? You had a situation come up in your life and you said, I got this, I can handle this. And you found out later you didn't handle it very well. Does that happen to anybody? Okay, I see a hand up, all right. Point being is that it happens in sports. Think about this. How many times many of you played on sports teams? How many times have you went against a foe that you thought was an inferior opponent only to find out that you didn't play so well and you got beat? You went in overconfident. Well, what happens is, I believe pride is the devil's favorite sin. And the reason I believe that is because it comes in so quietly. It comes in so slowly. All of you remember Hurricane Matthew. Hurricane Matthew comes, and at my little place out there, it rained and rained and rained, and in 6 hours, all the water was gone. I said, man, I hate it for everybody that's flooded, but we are in great shape. Next morning I got up, I looked back and I was like, where'd that water come from back there? The next morning I got up, it's in my yard. The next morning I get up and it's 3 feet deep in my yard. Where did this water come from? Well, pride sort of does the same thing. Pride doesn't a lot of times overwhelm you, but what happens is it sneaks into your life and you don't even realize it's there. And so what's got to happen is God has got to bring you to a place where you stumble in order for you to realize that you've got pride in your life and it's affecting you. And so what happens is we have people go through life with prideful attitudes and prideful opinions, and they think more highly of themselves than they ought to, and they don't even realize it because it just sneaked in on them. So what's happened with Joshua? It sneaked in on Joshua and it's bit him. Now here's the sign that I want to share with you. In Proverbs 13, about verse 10, it tells us that where pride is, there's going to be contention. In other words, there's going to be some strife in your life when you have pride in your life. Now, everybody's thinking, oh, Lord, I've got strife in my life. Where does that come from? Well, more than likely, if you'll start looking at it, even in your relationships at work, your relationships at home, your relationships at church, and you think about the strife that's going on, if you really think about it and pray about it, what you'll probably figure out is that there's some pride in somebody's life. Somebody's making a decision out of pride. Somebody's making a decision or doing something because they're prideful. Somebody is reacting to something out of pride. And when that happens, strife is created. Because, again, God is not in it. One of the things that God says He hates is pride. He hates it because it takes us out of relationship with Him. Because pride is inwardly focused. And when it's inwardly focused, that means it's not on Him. He didn't create us to be inwardly focused. He created us to be outwardly focused. He created us for me to be more concerned about Cameron and her life than me and my life. I should be more concerned about how my wife is doing than how I'm doing. I should be more concerned about you than me. That's the way God's created us to do. And when we function in that manner, we live life at a very high level, a very fulfilling level. But you know what? Most of us don't live that life because we do have some pride. It is in there, and we don't acknowledge it. And self really likes pride because it makes us feel good. Listen, why do people try to run over other people? It makes them feel good for a few minutes, doesn't it? I mean, isn't that what it's all about? Why are people stubborn? Because it makes them feel good about who they are and what they're thinking and that they're right. And it feeds the flesh and helps them feel good about who they are. That's why they do that. That's why they're over the top with people. So the point that I'm making is this, is that if you have pride in your life, if it creeps in, God's going to expose it. And when He exposes it, you need to do something about it. Because if you don't, what's going to happen is strife is going to rise up in your life. It's going to be at a high level in your relationships with your kids, with your spouses, other family members. It's going to be that way at church. It's going to be that way at work. And so it's your job and my job to keep a lid on pride and keep it out of our life and look for it. Here's what does a sports team do? What does the coach do after they come up with a big victory? Let's use the Duke North Carolina rivalry as an example. Duke wins the first match this year. What do you think Mike Krzyzewski was saying to his team coming into the second rematch? Was he saying, guys, we got this. We beat them last time, we'll beat them again. Is that what you think he said? What did he say? He probably said, listen, we were fortunate to win last time, but they're a good team and they can beat us. So what you better do is you better go out there and give it 100%. Don't get the idea that we got this, because you don't. You're going to have to work hard to get this. Well, here's what I'm trying to tell you, and that is that you and I need to work very hard in order to keep pride out of our life. Because if you don't, it will creep in, and it will be present, and it will cause problems in your life. There's three things that pride does. I got just a minute. I'm going to share this with you. I planned to do this, but I'm going to do it. There's three things that pride opens the door for. The first thing is the lust of the flesh. And what that means is that anything, when you've got pride in your life, it opens the door for the lust of the flesh. That means that anything that satisfies your flesh, your pride is going to be receptive to. So in other words, if it makes me feel good, I'm going to do it. I'm going to eat too much, or I'm going to drink, or I'm going to do drugs, or I'm going to watch things on TV, or I'm going to watch porn, or whatever it is that the lust of the flesh is doing that's going to make it feel good. If it's putting other people down, or if it's being negative, or if it's stirring up strife with other people to hide the own strife that's in your life. In other words, the lust of the flesh is going to run rampant in your life. Paul lists them in Galatians, and man, there's just 17 of them there. And it's just so many things that it allows you to come in. All the uncleanness of your mind, the way you dress, all that stuff comes out of pride. The other thing that happens is it's the lust of the eyes. It opens up your idea of what the world system wants you to have. Think about this. How much is enough? I like this James Bond movie that says The World Is Not Enough. Do y'all remember that movie? The title of it was The World Is Not Enough. Well, guess what? When the lust of the eyes get fed by pride, the world is not enough. You can't have enough. You don't have enough money. You don't have enough houses. You don't have enough friends, Facebook friends. You don't have enough guns or boats or cars or clothes or shoes or pocketbooks or whatever it is those things are that you like. How much is enough? Point is it will never be enough. When you start feeding that part of your pride, it will never be enough. I'll tell you a story about myself. A few years ago, I started kind of collecting guns, and I had a pretty good little collection going. I probably had about 55 or so, and I didn't buy cheap guns. I had very nice guns. And one of the things that always kind of made my day was somebody asked to see my gun collection. And so I loved opening up my safe and showing off my guns and, that kind of thing. But one day I reached to my gun safe and I pulled out a gun. I had no idea. 3 years, I'd had it 3 years. Tag's still on it. Totally forgot what I even bought it for or why I had it. So the point that I'm making is that when I really started looking at that, God convicted me about it, and I realized that I had these guns for the wrong reason. It wasn't that I really appreciated the guns, but what I really appreciated was folks wanting to look at my guns. So God said, sell them. So guess what? I sold most of them. And so the issue is that now I'm not so prideful when I open my safe, because there's really not a whole lot in there for me to look at. And there's not a whole lot for me to show people. They're going to say, oh, that's nice. So I don't open it anymore. All right? But point being is that was a source of pride in my life. It can be little things like that lead you to think differently about people and think about who you are. So here's the other one. That's 3. Lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and now the pride of life. Here's the problem. Pride opens up the door to the pride of life. Here's what I mean by that. When you begin to think of yourself as being just as capable or more capable than God. In other words, I don't need to ask God anything. Here's the thing. Most people who have money, serious money, generally aren't real godly people. And I'm making a generalization here. But why is that? Why is it when people accumulate a lot of wealth that there really aren't godly people? They don't need God. Money solves all their issues. Whatever their issue is, money will solve it. They don't have to pray about it. One thing that's happened in this ministry, I'm probably praying about things I haven't prayed about in many, many years. For a long time I was in banking. I made good money. I just kind of rolled. Guess what? I'm praying about money. You know what I mean? But you know what? I'm relying on God. God's telling me I got this, and I'm saying, you got to show me. You got to show me. And He says, I'll show you. So the point that I'm making is this. God wants us in an intimate, tight relationship with Him. And pride will be the thing that will slip in and distance that relationship before you can blink your eyes. You won't even realize it's there. A lot of times other people will see it in you, but you won't see it in yourself. The only way you see it yourself is to ask God, is this in my life? And if it is, then I want to get rid of it. But I'll give you this. Here's a hint. When you start saying I, and you start referring to me and mine, and you hear those words coming out of your mouth, you might have a pride issue in your life. So whenever you're talking to somebody and you can't listen to them because you want to say I, or me, or mine, when you get to that point, here's your sign. You need to start figuring that pride's risen up in your life, and it's sneaked in on you. It's sneaked in on you. All right, we're going to finish with that. I hope that you think about pride a little bit when you leave here today. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we're so thankful. We're so thankful that